Good afternoon, and welcome to the sixth session of More Time for Books, a special program of Women's League for Conservative Judaism that is meant to help us unisolate during this period and keep on learning and socializing with one another. I'm Vivian Lieber, a Vice President of Women's League and the Chair of the Women's League Reads program and Books programs. Women's League Reads will hold our next author interview, I want to make a little plug for that, on June 2nd at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time with author Goldie Goldblum. She'll talk about her novel On Division, a powerful story of a Hasidic woman testing community boundaries and discovering her individuality during a crisis. To join our Women's League Reads programs, please send an email to Lois Silverman at lsilverman@wlcj.org with your sisterhood's name and location or your Women's League membership number. I want to welcome you all and welcome Rabbi Ellen Wallens-Fields, Women's League's Executive Director, and also our presenters today, who I will introduce in a moment. We're going to be celebrating mystery, detective, and spy stories in fiction and nonfiction. These are genres that many people find addictive, and many have favorite authors whose every new book they will read as soon as it's published. It's a genre where there's often a series with the same leading hero and with villains that are profoundly scary. Joining me in leading the discussion and profiling some books and some writers are two Judaic bibliophiles, or three, Ellen Tillman and Merrill Karras. Ellen Tillman will present first. She is the Director of Library Services at Reform Congregation Knesset Israel in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, and she is a member of the Sisterhood of Beth Shalom Congregation in Elkins Park, one of our sisterhoods. Ellen participates in or leads several adult book groups. She works on a leadership team of the Association of Jewish Libraries, and she serves in the work of the One Book, One Jewish Community program in Philadelphia. Merrill Karras is a member of the Sisterhood of Temple Beth Abraham in Nashua, New Hampshire. She'll present after Ellen. There she began and expanded the Sisterhood Book Club that goes by the name Babka. She also leads and participates in a number of other book clubs, and she is a trustee at her local library. Merrill also once wrote a master's thesis entitled, It's a Mystery, What's Jewish About the Jewish Detective Novel? And the third presenter, Rabbi Ellen Wallens-Fields, our executive director. She has her own favorite author. As time permits, I'll call on audience members during the open discussion. After this, send me an email privately to vlieber@wlcj.org to request from me the list of books that were discussed today. We might take a couple of days to get that to you, and I'll send it privately. If you've asked me before, you'll automatically get the list this time as well. So with that, I want to call on Ellen Tillman.
Thank you, Vivian. My first question is, who reads mysteries? If you're a mystery fan, just raise your hand a little bit so we can see. I don't see anything. I see one. Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, today we are going to explore why so many people like mysteries, but specifically talking about mysteries with a Jewish flavor. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is the history of the mystery novel. Mysteries are the most popular form of fiction published today. At any one time, there are more than 10,000 mystery titles in print. Other than romance novels, more mystery and crime novels are sold than any other fiction genre. So we ask, why are mysteries so popular? One reason is they give us an escape from reality. There have been many recent articles in the press alluding to the fact that during this current pandemic, many readers are returning to favorite mystery authors or finding new ones. A second reason is they demand your complete attention for a short amount of time. Third, they're easy to read. And fourth, they present an academic challenge, similar to word games, Sudoku, crossword puzzles. Are you able to find the murderer before the detective? It's a big challenge. The detective novel is an invention of the 19th century in both England and the United States. At this time, there was a rational system of laws beginning in both countries. Combining this with man's natural curiosity, his fondness for puzzles, and a growing need for police forces to maintain order and to prevent violence, you had an ideal atmosphere for the beginning of a detective novel. In earlier time, there were romanticized outlaws, think like Robin Hood, or there were true accounts of villains who met bad ends and whose punishment was intended to discourage the reader from engaging in crime, such as Jesse James. The word detective did not appear in the English language until 1842, when it was the name of a new department of the Metropolitan Police Force in London, the Detective Division. The word detective existed beforehand as an adjective, but it meant disclosed, open, or exposed. Changing the word detected from an adjective to a noun indicates a recognition that there is a new method of solving crimes, one that uses rational thinking and logic. A person could employ the so-called scientific method, make observations of facts, postulate a theory about them, and then prove that the theory is accurate through experimentation and analysis. Next slide, please. As every mystery reader knows, this is the methodology of the famed Sherlock Holmes. If we had more time, we would look at the list of famous literary detectives and compare them and find out who was their author and created. Sherlock Holmes was created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in 1887. Doyle was a Scottish author and physician, and he created Holmes as a detective who used logical reasoning and forensic science. Holmes was the master of disguise and used this ability to blend in with the crowd. Set primarily in London, Holmes appeared in 4 novels and 56 short stories. All but 4 of these works are narrated by Holmes's friend, Dr. John Watson. Though a work of fiction, many tourists still visit 221B Baker Street to see where Sherlock Holmes lived. It's said that the British author, Arthur Conan Doyle, felt that he had to apologize to his mother, that he was only a mystery writer and not something substantive like a doctor or a lawyer. Interestingly, the first detective novel was The Murders in the Rue Morgue, written by Edgar Allan Poe, an American, in 1841. This book contains the first 3 mysteries starring the first detective, C. Auguste Dupin. Now, what makes a mystery Jewish? Jewish detective fiction is a subgenre of mysteries of detective fiction. It began, most people say, with the publication of Harry Kellerman's Friday the Rabbi Slept Late in 1962. This introduced Rabbi David Small and the Jewish community of Barnard's Crossing, a small city near Boston, modeled on the author's hometown of Marblehead, Massachusetts. Thank you. A leading figure in the study of Jewish mysteries is Rabbi Lawrence Raphael. He was the editor of 2 works on the subject. Now, we're still back. Mystery Midrash, an anthology of Jewish mystery short stories published in 1999, and a collection of new stories, Criminal Kabbalah, published in 2001. Both books were published by Jewish Likes. Beginning in 2003, he served as the rabbi of Shereth Israel Synagogue in San Francisco. He died in March of 2019 at the age of 72. Rabbi Raphael argues that Jewish fiction falls into one of 3 categories. The first is assimilation, where the cultural absorption of a minority group is into the main cultural body. In this context, the Jewish characters are just accidentally Jewish. Maybe they went to a Seder, maybe they eat matzo ball soup, maybe they had a bar mitzvah. The next category is acculturation. This is where different cultures came into close contact with them. This is where their religious, cultural, or ethnic background serves to eliminate the development of the character or the plot. They go to services 3 times a year. They like kosher delis. They hated Hebrew school. The final grouping is affirmation, where there's a positive declaration. In this context, the novels are proud of their identity, and some aspect of the Judaism serves to advance the plot. This is the smallest category, and the authors that I'm going to discuss fall here. We're going to look at 4 Jewish mystery authors. I call them the classics: Harry Kellerman, Joseph Telushkin, Faye Kellerman, and Batya Gore. I like their work because in addition to reading a good story with usually a surprise ending, I also learned something new or insightful about Judaism. I'm getting a Jewish education in a light and entertaining manner. Harry Kellerman's books, which we see both his first and his last one here on the slide, were written more than 50 years ago, and they are still considered the standard for Jewish detective novels. This is due to the protagonist, Rabbi David Small. Kellerman made him the rabbi of a temple, moderate to liberal conservative, in a typical suburban Jewish community. We can all identify with the congregation, the community, and the issues that are discussed in the books. In each of Kellerman's Rabbi Small books, there is congregational intrigue, Jewish knowledge, and a murder. There's usually a skeptic, some family discord, and a few red herrings to throw both the amateur and the professional detective off the track. Rabbi Small was the protagonist of 12 novels written by Kellerman. The first book was Friday the Rabbi Slept Late, published in 1964. In this story, a young woman's body is discovered in the parking lot of a synagogue, and Rabbi Small, a newly hired rabbi in the town of Barnard's Crossing, is accused of killing her. The rabbi not only proves his innocence, but becomes friends with Hugh Lanigan, the Irish Catholic chief of police. Interestingly, Rabbi Small is not the primary detective in any of these books. He serves as the lightning rod through which the discovery of the murder proceeds. He talks to people, analyzes the situation, uses his rabbinic training and insights, and then shares all of the above with his friend, the chief of police. Kellerman weaves Jewish knowledge into the plot of each of his books. In Friday the Rabbi Slept Late, Rabbi Small deals with Talmud teachings. In Wednesday the Rabbi Got Wet, 1967, we learn the Jewish attitude towards meditation, mysticism, religious retreats, and Christianity. Judaism is found throughout the books in the images and themes, making them seem completely Jewish. The fact that many readers still refer to the rabbi as their favorite or their only Jewish detective suggests the power of a little Judaism. Kellerman grew up in Boston, where his parents had settled after emigrating from Russia. He wanted to be a writer and studied English literature at Boston University. He taught school for many years. After serving in World War II, he was appointed an assistant professor of English at Franklin Technical Institute. His early short stories featured Nicky Welt, a college professor who solved mysteries using logic. These were not a financial success. Friday the Rabbi Slept Late won the Mystery Writers of America Edgar Allan Poe Award in 1964. The final book in the series, The Day the Rabbi Left Town, was published 2 years before the author died at the age of 87. There are more than 7 million copies of the Rabbi Small books published in dozens of languages. Non-Jewish readers found the insights into current Jewish thinking and beliefs in these books fascinating. As Kellerman said, quote, "With us, faith in the Christian sense is almost meaningless, since God is by definition unknowable. Our religion is a code of ethical behavior." His books explain and teach the reader that rabbis shouldn't be compared to priests or ministers. They're really experts in Jewish law. His purpose in all of these stories was to teach and explain Judaism to Jews and Gentiles. Okay, next slide. Joseph Telushkin. A behind-the-scenes view of religion is especially evident in the work of Rabbi Joseph Telushkin. He wrote 3 mysteries using the character of Rabbi Daniel Winter. Rabbi Telushkin is much better known as the author of nonfiction works on Jewish topics: biblical literacy, Jewish humor, Jewish literacy, and Jewish wisdom. His most recent book, Rabbi, about the Lubavitch Rebbe Menachem Schneerson was published only a few years ago. He also co-wrote 2 best-selling books with his childhood friend, Dennis Prager, 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism and Why the Jews. Both Prager and Telushkin attended the Flatbush Yeshiva in Brooklyn for high school. Dennis is now the host of a syndicated conservative talk show, The Dennis Prager Show. For many years, he was the director of the Brandeis Bardeen Institute in Simi Valley, California. His friend, Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, served as the educational director of the institution. Rabbi Telushkin was ordained by Yeshiva University and did graduate work in Jewish history at Columbia University. He lives in New York City with his wife, Devorah, and they have 4 grown children. The protagonist in Telushkin's mystery books is Rabbi Daniel Winter. I think that this character is heavily based on the real Dennis Prager. His first book, The Unorthodox Murder of Rabbi Wall, published in 1987. The feminist Rabbi Myrna Wall is deliberately run over by a car after appearing on Rabbi Winter's controversial radio talk show. Rabbi Winter is one of the suspects. The books begin as the rabbi is struggling to find a topic for a sermon. His wife has died and he is currently single. Meet the love interest in the book and his future wife, Brenda Goldstein. He meets the love interest and his future wife when there's a theft in the bar mitzvah class at his synagogue. She is a psychologist who works for the Los Angeles Police Department. Rabbi Daniel Winter is the host of a popular radio show, Religion and You. His guests are a rabbi, a minister, and a priest. Dennis Prager had a similar show. He's also the proud author of The Religious Manifesto. The Rabbi Winter is offered a full-time job at the radio station. He seriously considers it. Think of it, the chance to spread a message, his message, to a congregation of 500,000 instead of 1,000. And what a congregation, without a president, asking where he'd been when he was out of the office or why he missed a morning service. What a temptation. He didn't accept the job. In his books, we learn about Shabbat services, Shabbat dinner, relations with the synagogue president, the role of women, feminism, weddings. Rabbi Winter describes himself as an Orthodox rabbi in a conservative congregation with Reform lay people. In the final analysis, the next book is heavily influenced by a Elie Wiesel lecture Telushkin attended more than 20 years before writing the book. Can we have the next slide? At that time, Wiesel spoke about Rabbi Akiva. He also credits the Maurice Lamb book on the Jewish way in Death and Dying for additional content and inspiration. In one scene, Rabbi Winter goes to see a congregant who's a president of a bank, and he wants him to do a mitzvah. But he gets there and sits there and he says nothing. Then he says, quote, in Jewish law, it is a commandment to refrain from saying something you know will not be listened to. So I came to fulfill that commandment. The bank president says, what wasn't I going to listen to? Maybe I will. The rabbi asks for a continuation on the eviction of Sadie Rosen, an elderly and very ill member of his congregation. The books have many red herrings to confuse the readers. Rabbi Winter finds the body of Dr. Stark in the doctor's office. He himself becomes a subject. Lieutenant Joe Cerisi of the police is the non-Jewish student whom the rabbi instructs in the logic of Judaism. He teaches Torah at a funeral, and in the Stark book, he presents insights into the life of Jewish Holocaust survivors in Southern California that become crucial to solving the mystery. He also attends banquets, many, many of them. At one, he hears the speaker tell the story of 2 men on a journey. They have only 1 pitcher of water. Who should drink the water? He uses the teachings of Rabbi Akiva on this story to finally solve the murder in the book. I love the epilogue of this one, in which Telushkin tells what happened to each of the primary characters. Judaism comes across as a little bit harsher in the Telushkin books than in the Kemmelman works, perhaps because Rabbi Telushkin is being more realistic and less idealistic. Next slide. Faye Kellerman has written a series of novels featuring Rena Lazarus, a beautiful young Orthodox widow and a police detective, Peter Decker. Her first book, The Ritual Bath, was published in 1986. Almost every year since then, a new title has been added to the series. The Ritual Bath focuses on extremes in human behavior, the piety and rigidity of ultra-Orthodox Jews, to the brutality of rapists and drug-dependent anti-Semitic gang members. The story takes place in a cloistered yeshiva in the hills outside of Los Angeles. Rape rather than murder is the major crime in this work. There are two sleuths, Peter Decker, a cynical police detective, and Rena Lazarus, a young and open-minded ultra-Orthodox widow. As one would expect, romance develops between the two. Rena's husband died from a brain tumor at the age of 28, leaving her with two young sons. She's permitted to live in his old yeshiva in exchange for teaching the students and serving as the mikveh lady. Decker is attracted to her the minute he sees her. Quote, there was something classic about her face, the oval shape, creamy skin full soft mouth, startling blue eyes. She was, quote, was goddamn beautiful. Even the long sleeved shirt and dowdy skirt couldn't hide a curvaceous body that brushed against the material as she walked. But it was her face, the combination of innocence and sensuality that got to him. Decker is a detective in the Los Angeles Police Department. He's age 38, 6 feet 4 inches tall, redheaded, and a good cop, smart and dedicated. We soon learned that he did ranching as a kid in Florida, construction work in high school. He was a lawyer for a while. He is a big man with strong features, and despite the fair-skinned and ginger hair, dark penetrating eyes, he enlisted to serve in Vietnam, and can never quite forget his experiences there. He's divorced from a Jewish wife and has a teenage daughter. As a child, he was adopted and brought up by a Baptist couple in Florida. We later learned that his birth parents were both Jewish, which makes him Jewish. Yet, he secretly studied Judaism with Rabbi Shulman, the religious expert in all of the Kellerman novels, to learn about Judaism and help him to decide to become a practicing Orthodox Jew. From Kellerman, we are taught the details of many Orthodox religious observances, including the laws of kashrut, feminine modesty, and tacharat hamishpacha, family purity. The novels show how even a cloistered and self-contained religious community faces threats from the mainstream culture, whether it be baseball games and children's toys or violent criminal attacks. I particularly enjoyed the culminating scene in the first book, Ritual Bath, where the murderer is captured by being hit over the head with a volume of Talmud. Kellerman portrays her religious Jewish characters with respect, but also able to be flawed. In another book, Rena and Peter track down a homicidal kidnapper who has lured a boy away from an ultra-Orthodox family in New York. The boy's sheltered environment left him very naive in terms of street smarts, but also curious about the secular world around him. Kellerman poses the question, quote, is the world of strict religious practice a prison or a refuge? Kellerman was born in 1952 in St. Louis, Missouri, and grew up in Sherman Oaks, California. She earned a BA in mathematics and a doctorate in dentistry from UCLA. She conducted research in oral biology, but never practiced as a dentist. She's married to the novelist psychologist Jonathan Kellerman, and they have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. 2 of the children have also published novels. Her son Jesse has written with both Faye and her husband, and their daughter Eliza writes young adult novels. Next slide. More than 20 million copies of her novels are in print throughout the world. Faye Kellerman's latest Peter Decker Rena Lazarus book, her 26th book, will be published in January of 2021, this coming January. It is titled The Lost Boys. Many Jewish mysteries attempt to explain Jewish culture and religion to those who know little about it. The Rabbi's small books emphasize the sleuthing skills of the rabbi, which derive from his Talmudic thinking and rational processes. Kellerman's novels place more emphasis on Judaism as comforting, a contrast to the violent, crime-ridden world of contemporary America. Orthodoxy is presented as a practice with orderliness and guidelines for behavior. Her novels show Jews in a positive way, but also a voyeuristic quality to them. We're the outsiders looking into their world, such as the detective who works with Decker on the LAPD, Marge Dunn. We become aware of how Orthodox Judaism has been targeted by hatred and that it has produced its own criminals who find the restrictions of orthodoxy to be overbearing. Other mystery writers emphasize Jewish ethnicity more than Jewish practice. This can be applied to mysteries written in Israel. In recent years, Hebrew literature has reflected the changes in Israeli society, especially the division and diversification of Israeli identity and society. Israeli author Batya Gur has written mysteries with Jewish characters and settings placed in Israel. Next slide. She presents Israeli life with all of its colors and conflicts. She does not teach Torah, yet these books are Jewish because of their locale and the local color that she teaches. They go to have onion soup at a cafe on Ben Yehuda Street. They go shopping at the Machane Yehuda Market. They're at a house in the German colony or in Rehavia. In 1988, she began writing the mystery series. She wrote 6 Michael Ohayon mysteries, all of which have been translated into English. Her protagonist is Chief Superintendent Michael Ohayon of the Jerusalem Police Force. He's a dark-skinned Moroccan Jew who was trained in history and literature at Cambridge University. He's the author of an unfinished doctoral dissertation on medieval guilds. He's divorced from his wife and the father of a teenage son. In each novel, Ohayon enters a world or isolated society with its own rules. We can look at the next slide. A psychoanalytic society, a university department, a kibbutz, etc. Using his understanding of human nature, Ohayon is able to unlock the secrets of the group in order to solve the murder. Batya Gur was born in Tel Aviv in 1947 to Holocaust survivors. She earned a master's degree in Hebrew literature from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and taught literature there before beginning her writing career at the age of 38. She was also a literary critic for Haaretz. Next slide. Unfortunately, she died of cancer in 2005 at the age of 57. She is considered to be the person responsible for making the detective novel a flourishing genre in Israeli literature. Reviewers commented that her crime novels were less about the death of the body than sustained, thoughtful explorations of the life of the mind. I was particularly aware of the dated details in these books. When the police department needed to reach Ohayon, they would call on his radio or leave a message at the location. He would use a local or a pay phone to keep them informed. There were no cell phones, faxes, or emails. It really seemed like a foreign society. So in conclusion, my favorite Jewish whodunits are the mysteries in which I learned something about Judaism. I enjoy the suspense and the mystery, but also the experience of learning something new. It's almost like getting 2 books for the price of 1. Rabbi Raphael says, quote, "Much of the appeal of these novels lies in the dual appeal of escape from our daily lives and of reassurance that we can cope with our daily lives. While most of us don't chase scam artists into Mexico or become the target of a contract killer, we do know the fears of being the next person to be downsized at the office or being mugged on downtown streets or finding drug paraphernalia in our child's bedroom. The best of the mystery novels allow us to confront those fears by fictionalizing and exaggerating the boogeyman into the worst possible situation, murder, and offering the detective as the knight who slays the dragon for us. We get the thrill of the big scare, but all in the safety of our comfortable chair or wherever we like to read. Plus, we have the reassurance that the dragon can be slain and by someone not at all different from us. I hope you will take a time to check out the works of Harry Kellerman, Joseph Telushkin, Faye Kellerman, and Batya Gur. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. That was terrific. Learned a great deal, and look forward to reading a couple of books I never read before.
Yeah, I did check. Most of them are available on Amazon or in libraries.
Great. So with that, Meryl Karras, and we will hear your presentation, and then we'll have a little more. So, Meryl, are you there?
Following up, I did a list of authors, many who are not writing anymore, but have complete series, all Jewish authors with also a Jewish aspect to their writing and in different ways. So the first one is Jor Mishani, and he's a newish Israeli author who came on the scene. So, okay, so he came on the scene in 2011 with his first detective novel, The Missing File. So he came on the scene in 2011 with his first detective novel, The Missing File. And when I interviewed Mishani, he spoke about the lack of detective fiction in Israel, that Bat Yagur was the big name there, but that it was not really a popular genre. His series now has these 3 books that feature police detective Avram. And this novel, the first one, was shortlisted for a 2013 CWA International Dagger Award and won the Martin Beck Award for its best translated crime novel in Sweden, and has also been translated into 15 languages. The second novel won the Bernstein Award for Best Hebrew Novel in 2014. He's also a
Vivian, is it on?
scholar.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
He's also a literary scholar, specializing in the history of the detective fiction, and he lives and teaches in Tel Aviv. If you go to the next slide, this is his newest novel, 3. It's a standalone that was published in Hebrew in 2018 and is now being translated into a number of languages, including English, and will be available here in June. The next author, going up to John Land, is an American author who writes about Israel from here in Rhode Island. This is an older series that's complete with those books. No new books are being written, unfortunately. He wrote this series featuring a Palestinian detective and an ex-Detroit cop named Ben Kamal and a Jerusalem police inspector named Danielle Barnea. So the interesting part of this series is the interaction between a Palestinian police officer and an Israeli Shin Bet inspector working together to solve crimes that cross over between the 2 neighbors. And these are described as more thriller novels than mysteries, but they were really fun to read. You learn a lot about Israel while reading them.
Okay. I got it
Okay,
bigger on
going
the
on
screen.
to the next.
Libby Astaire?
Is Libby Astaire, and she lives in Israel, and she writes a Jewish Regency mystery series that she says she writes where mystery and Jewish history meet. And these novels are not written for an Israeli audience, they are written for an English audience outside of Israel. Her series is written about London's Jewish community during the Regency period of history, which encompasses the years 1811 to 1820. And Ezra Melamed is a newly widowed, wealthy man of means and a pillar of his Jewish community. He's the amateur detective in this series, and he's assisted by his Watson, who records the stories, a young girl named Rebecca Lyon, who is living vicariously from her home through Melamed's adventures. He also is assisted by a group of young pickpockets who search out clues for him in places that he would not go in London. So that's a fun series, very light, and you learn a lot about what life was like for the Jewish community in Regency period London. Moving on to the next is Michael Kahn. He's a trial lawyer by day and a writer by night. He's the award-winning author of the Rachel Gold Mystery Series. These novels are all about the different legal mysteries solved when people retain the lawyer's lawyer, Rachel Gold, the savvy young attorney who left a prestigious firm to open her own law office and teams up with her best buddy, the brilliant and vulgar Benny Goldberg, to solve various crimes. The funny story about this author is that he started writing these novels because he loved reading mystery novels and would complain to his wife that he could figure them out before the end of the book. So she challenged him to write one of his own, And he surprised himself, and when the publisher asked for him to write another 2 after the first, gave him a contract for the second 2 after the first one was accepted. And he hadn't realized that he was going to be starting to write a series. He also, if you go to the next slide, has a new book that's just been published, The Bad Trust. And that's just out now. Then we move on to Ed Goldberg, the author of the Lenny Schneider. Oh, nope, we move on to, that's fine. Go to that one, I'll do her. We move on to Ayelet Waldman, who's a very well-known author. She's written a number of books in different genres, but I'm just going to focus here on her Mommy Track mystery series. And this is I thought was a very fun series about a public defender and now new stay-at-home mom, Juliet Applebaum, and her partner, a private detective, the cranky Al Hockey. And between them, they balance clue chasing with diaper changing and breastfeeding in this very clever, entertaining series. Her husband, Peter, stays home with the children while she goes off chasing criminals in these lighthearted books. All right, next is Rochelle Creech, who introduces a 20-something Molly Bloom with her deep faith, short skirts, and nose for truth, who's a heroine to cherish in this series of just 4 novels. It is too bad that there aren't more of these in the series. Equally appealing enough to make us wish for more is the affectionate portrait of a large, boisterous Jewish family. Everyone needs a wise grandmother like Molly's and a sideline love story, a little bit like a throwaway, but the fascinating look into the culture and rituals of Orthodox Judaism more than make up for it. She nicely captures the sense of community that religious faith can create, and she skillfully paints the special beauty of the desert landscape outside Los Angeles. Then another series that she wrote, in the next slide, is the second series featuring Jessica Drake, a homicide detective who only recently found out about her Jewish roots. Here, Creech is teaching and raising 6 children while she began her writing career, and she juggles these and other series. The juggling is difficult, she admits, and I've made my share of mistakes. At one point, the hems of my daughter's uniform skirts were being held up by safety pins, and I served way too many macaroni and cheese dinners. But somehow we all managed, and her children and her husband have been supportive, but that doesn't mean they were never cranky, she says. So these 2 books, this one from that finds out she's Jewish later on in life and is exploring Judaism, and the other one from the Orthodox point of view, 2 very different series, but both wonderfully fun. Next is, switch up the next one. Let's see who you've got.
It's frozen. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's a bit frozen. I'm not really sure why. This wasn't the last one?
No, there should have been some
Oh,
more.
sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Was there
Marissa
one
Pyman.
before? Okay, here.
That's good. Marissa Pyman, another wonderful author who also wrote entertaining mystery novels. And she also is no longer adding to the series. I think a number of these women are kind of later in life and aren't writing anymore. The New York attorney and assistant New York State Attorney General, Marissa Pyman, writes the popular Nina Fishman series, and is also a co-author back in 1984 of the Yuppie Handbook. Nina Fishman is an amateur sleuth and attorney, too busy running down to the housing court on behalf of her poverty law clients and tracking down sales on sweaters that camouflage the hips. And she works along with her mother, come sidekick Ida, who has a nose for gossip and can't keep her nose out of trouble for too long. And so all these novels give you a Jewish religious flavor, but also very cultural flavor of working with her. The mother-daughter relationship with is always kind of funny in a Jewish context. And then the next slide is Sharon Khan, who worked as an arbitrator, attorney, and a graduate of Vassar College and the University of Arizona Law School. She was the former wife of a rabbi and mother of 3, lives in Austin, Texas, and she spent 31 years as a rabbi's wife, which inspired the novels that follow the adventures of Ruby Rothman, a newly widowed Rebbitzin, as she negotiates the politics of her local synagogue and solve crimes in Eternal, Texas. Fax Me a Bagel, the first in the series, was nominated for an Agatha Award for Best First Novel and also was an alternate selection for the Book of the Month Club. And I think there's one more.
Yep.
Is my last one, Ed Goldberg, author of the Lenny Schneider mystery series with just 3 books, a short-lived series written about a New York private detective who solves mysteries on the streets of the city. An example of a non-religious Jewish detective that just plays up the New York culture Jewish character in Lenny, dropping Yiddish phrases and referring to certain foods. You can relate to the character in this gumshoe as he solves crimes. And so those are just a few of the long list of Jewish mystery authors, way too many to share here today.
What a great collection. And if there's anything that could lighten us up in these times, both of you presented books that can do that. So I'd like to turn now to Rabbi Walensfield. Tell us about a couple of books, or to first show us an important video, brief video.
So we're going to have a little interlude for all of this to whet your taste to something that you should be marking your calendar for. July 12th is our Women's League virtual convention. I will go through a series of different things on my computer to get it up, but I hope that everyone has put it on their calendar. You can't register yet because the registration is not quite up yet, but it will be soon. And there will be something for everyone that day. I'm having a little bit of difficulty finding the video. It's here, don't worry. And here, we were going to have a lot to do with books, but we're doing that beforehand, but I hope that everyone will join us. So.
Hi, I'm Margie Miller. I'm the Women's League president. I'd like to introduce you to our 2020 convention team.
You can all hear, right?
Hi, I'm Debbie Goldich, Convention 2020 Chair, Sisters Journeying Together.
Hi, I'm Eileen Rubin, 2020 Convention Program Vice Chair.
I'm Renee Ravitch, 2020 Convention Vice Chair of Logistics.
And I'm Marilyn Berkowitz, the other Vice Chair for Logistics for Convention 2020.
As you know, we will not be journeying to Schaumburg, Illinois. Instead, convention will be coming to us. We have taken the best of convention and will be bringing a wonderful day to you on Sunday, July 12th. So stay tuned for all the details and plan on joining us. See you in Schaumburg.
So many of you have seen me on these calls, and they're definitely different dimensions of my life. One is that I have a BA in Talmud, and it can take you more than a day to study a page of Talmud. So in my downtime, I like to read. And what I like to read is books that honestly I'll get through quickly and that are an easy read that will really capture my attention and not want me to put it down and go to something else. It's very easy in other facets. If you've ever studied a daf of Talmud, you can put it down for a little while out of frustration. But a good book, you can't put down. I've never lost sleep over not getting through a page of Gemara unless it was a test, but I have lost sleep by wanting to finish a book. So I'm an avid reader, and I have to say it was only about 2 years ago that I started reading James Patterson. Vivian follows me on Goodreads, so she knows that I read him often. And when we were working in Manhattan, I have about a 2-hour commute each way, so about 4-hour commute that sometimes you need downtime. You can't, I have my Gemara in my bag, and I usually have either a James Patterson book on audio or on my Kindle or carrying the book itself. But so I split my 4 hours on the train between studying Gemara and reading Patterson, and now that I'm working from home, I haven't gotten to read as many books anymore, but I've kept up on the Gemara. So James Patterson, I don't know how many people have read his books. There are actually Facebook groups for him, like fan groups that you can join. He was born in March 22nd, 1947, born in Newburgh, New York. He lives in Florida now, and he reminds me of, I don't know, some people might get this joke. I actually told Rabbi David Golinkin a few weeks ago this, and he got it. He's kind of like the Jacob Neusner of mystery books, because his name is on a ton of books, like Jacob Neusner. And Jacob Neusner often wrote his books of blessed memory with his assistants and his graduate students. So James Patterson has many books that he wrote himself, but he also has many co-authors as well on his books. But he's not only a great author, he's a philanthropist too. Actually, in his description of who he is, it says American author and philanthropist, and you can't say that about a lot of people. His net worth is incredible. I have it written here somewhere, but it doesn't matter how much. Oh, his total income is $700 million. But he received an award from the National Book Foundation where they said that he was a passionate campaigner to make books and reading a national priority, a generous supporter of universities, teachers, colleges, independent bookstores, school libraries, and college students. Patterson has donated millions of dollars in grants and scholarships with the purpose of encouraging Americans of all ages to read more books. He received a BA in English from Manhattan College, an MA in English at Vanderbilt College, and he was actually enrolled to get a PhD in English at Vanderbilt, but he went into advertising instead, which he retired in 1996. His first novel, which I have to say wasn't one of my favorites, was The Thomas Berryman Number in 1976. But since 1976, he's published 147 books, and 114 were New York Times best-selling novels. In fact, this week, the New York Times best-selling book is the one I'm reading right now, The 20th Victim, by him. He holds the New York Times record for the most #1 New York Times bestsellers by a single author, a total of 67 of those. It's also a Guinness World Book. 1 in 17, roughly, and this was from Wikipedia that I read it, so they may have not updated it, but when it was written, 1 in 17, roughly 6% of hardcover novels sold in the United States were by James Patterson. 300 million copies worldwide. So he doesn't just publish one book new. I think each time my husband has been sent to Costco, he's come back with a new book for me because the library is not open, so I can't get my books like I usually do. So I have a slideshow that is going to take me a little while to open up because I have to figure out which screen it's on. And there was one point this year that my mother, my sister, and I were all reading the same book that he had written. And that is how the family that reads together stays together. All three of us were reading his books. So one of the series of the books, and each book, he's very smart. He knows how to get people to read his books by attracting different types of people and where they live. So some of his books are set in San Francisco, the murder club, the women's murder club are in San Francisco. It's Alex Cross. So his Alex Cross books are set in Washington, D.C. His other series, Michael Bennett, is set in New York City. And those are personally are my favorite because I often can actually tell exactly where he's talking and what streets he's literally on at the time. So that is James Patterson sitting with his books. So Alex Cross, and I have to tell you, I've read all of these books. Alex Cross is set in Washington, D.C., and he often travels to other places. He's a bit of a ladies' man, so it's some romantic aspects in the book of Alex Cross, so I haven't exactly recommended it to my children to read. He's a single dad with 4 kids, 3 and 1 who's a foster child, and you really get to know the family. So he was raised by his grandmother, who they love to call Nana Mama, that's her name, because his mother died when he was younger. So it's really a multi-generational. You see the whole family going through it. His first book, Along Came a Spider, was written in 1993. So he's written 27 books in this one series that follows this one detective. And some people might say that they seem repetitious. They're really not repetitious. There's different stories in all of them. What's really fascinating is because Allie Cross, I didn't put on here, but Allie Cross, his little son, is actually a book in the Alex Cross series for children to read. And he comes out with new books all the time. Then we have the Women's Murder Club, which just came out with their newest book on the bottom here, 20th Victim. That's the book I'm reading now. This is honestly my favorite group, my favorite series, and you'll see why. It's about 4 women. So it also has a television series. The first book was only written, First to Die, came out in 2001. And since he's written 20 books, it's about 4 friends who live in San Francisco. And somehow, even though they often say we need confidentiality and we can't print it, they all are involved with cases. So Lindsay Boxer is a police officer. Cindy Thomas is a reporter. That's when they often need to tell her it's off the record, you can't print it. Claire Washburn is a medical examiner. Yuki Castanello is a defense attorney. And they're in every book together, helping together. And it really, there's no female bickering in it. They really show the camaraderie between the women to be able to solve the cases in San Francisco. So if I ever visit San Francisco, I'm going to go visit there where his books are published and spoken about. So then the Michael Bennett series. This is the first one I actually read. Step on a Crack came out in 2007. There's 12 in this series. So Michael Bennett is a detective that lives in the Manhattan. So of course I love that. Sometimes I can tell exactly what street he's on. And he is a single dad. He adopted 10 kids, they say, and he has this Irish grandfather who's a priest. So clearly he became a priest because he's a Catholic priest after he had his children. And he's raising his children with the help of an Irish nanny who he then falls in love with. There's a little bit too much sexual relationships in this book. So this too I have not suggested for my children to read, which is a pity. But I think he sometimes adds some of the aspects about relationships to keep people interested. And he also travels to many different places. The NYPD Red series is short, not too many. And I have to tell you, I have to admit, I have not read this series yet. But it's about Detective Zach Jordan, who investigates brutal crimes in New York. So I'm sure I'll be reading that soon because I love New York. The Private series is the series I'm actually in the middle of right now. So this is interesting because he's not only in one place. Private happens to be exactly that, a private detective named Jack Morgan, who also is a bit of a ladies' man. And he travels to different places. So Private Games was actually interesting. I was reading that. It's about moving the Olympics. And they came out in the real world at that exact time I was reading it. They were moving the Olympics for this year. So he travels in all different places and has private detectives. You can see they take place in London, Berlin, LA. And some of the Patterson books are written with co-authors. Some of them in the series, like you can see here on the chart, on the slide, Maxine Pitero, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, has co-authored some. Mark Sullivan co-authored some of them. Some of his books are actually novels. And then if you really want to just feel like you finished a book, he has a book shot, which is about 100 pages. And I could go through on a subway ride or a train, New York Jersey Transit train, at least 2 a day. Another series, which I think he really needs to develop more in my own personal way. If you ever wanted to know who I would want to meet in real life, it's James Patterson, to just pick his brain as to how he writes all these books. So Candace Fox has written all of them with him. It's a 4-book series about a female. So except for the Women's Murder Club, the women are not often the key protagonists of the story, but here, Harriet Blue is. It's set in Australia, and it's often that it shows her interrelationship with her brother, who happens to be on trial for things, and then they send her off to be a detective in other outer bank areas of Australia. So some of the books that I read, I have to tell you, I listen to on the train or while I'm exercising, and you can really picture where they take place. This is James Patterson delivering a graduation speech. And he hasn't developed all of his series. You can see that Invisible, Instinct, and Texas Ranger will probably be expanding. He has co-authors in all of them. Texas Outlaw is on my shelf. That's one that just came out. He literally came out with about 4 or 5 books just over quarantine. And honestly, these have nothing to do with Judaism. My life is so Jewish that sometimes I just need to read something that isn't. Killer Instinct also has a nice female protagonist in it. Dr. Dylan Reinhardt, he wrote a book on criminal behavior, and then everyone comes to him to talk to him about criminal behavior. In a lot of the James Patterson books, there's a lot of psychology in it. Alex Cross, the first series I spoke about, is a detective and also a psychologist. In The Killer Instinct, we have this Dylan Reinhardt, a doctor, and Detective Elizabeth Needham, who's a NYPD detective, who they describe as headstrong and brilliant. And in Invisible, it also has it's about an FBI researcher looking into different murders and fires, and the protagonist in that as well is a woman. Many of his books have been that's my last slide. Many of his books have been turned into movies. I have to admit, I have not watched any of the movies that he wrote because I prefer reading the book than watching the movie, but I'm sure they'll probably be a little different, but soon I'll be running out of what to watch on Netflix. So Judy Kenter, honestly, I don't think you have to read them in order. There's usually a couple of pages where he gives a little background of what happened. I haven't read all of them in order. Some of them I have. I have to tell you though, that except for the NYPD red one, I've read all of the books that I presented, except the Texas Outlaw I haven't yet, but it's on the shelf right here. And 20th Victim I'm in the middle of. So I don't know how I actually have gotten through all of them. If you ask me one particular book, I don't know if I would know exactly what happened in that specific book. But last year I read 141 books altogether, and I'm only up to 53 this year because I don't have the commute. But I love that I don't have the commute. And I also love that I get to read in front of my children, encouraging them to read too. And my boys have also read some of his James Patterson books because I haven't gotten here. If you ever do a children, he has written tons of children's series as well. So that's what I do in my spare time in addition to trying to catch up to.
I've also read every single one of Patterson's books.
Have you? Who's speaking?
It's Marion. I haven't read Hush Hush. I don't know and the 20th Victim. And
Just
I'm
came
down
out.
for the Texas, but of course the library's closed.
I know.
As soon as I see them, I order them in the library.
So you know what? I'll look up your address and I take a few days. I'm healthy. And I'll send you them because I don't have to give them to my mother because somehow each time I buy a book, my sister buys it the same day. So
well, my sister and I share. We go to the library Friday morning before the hairdresser, which I can't wait. And so she takes half and I take half, and then we switch. So we've read every single one, but I love the Women's Murder Club very much. I really like that one the best.
They're good. And I hear Instinct apparently is a good TV show too, I see. But I've been known to send my husband to the library to get the book off the back area where they have it, where they haven't even put it out yet, so that I could get it right away. Susan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to say I read Patterson for years and years when he first started writing books. And I read all Along Came the Spider and Mary, whatever. I read them all. And I like the Women's Murder Club. I still do read those. But I stopped reading Patterson. He came out with a book called Beach, and I liked Instinct, and that was a great TV show. But when he wrote this book called Beach House or something,
yeah,
it's horrible. I mean, it was, and so much sex and so much, it seemed so contrived. Plus, I hate to burst your bubble, but I don't think he writes those books. I think those co-authors are the author, and he puts his name on them.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling that's probably the case. He actually runs workshops of writing. So in my next life, I'll go into one, or when I retire. Hopefully he's still around when I retire. His standalone books, I've read a few of them. Beach House, I haven't read. I listened to Lifeguard. It was not something I wanted anyone.
Oh, that was the one. That was the one that turned me off.
It was terrible.
Lifeguard.
Yeah.
I didn't like it
either. The books. So
I wanted to mention a Jewish book that we read in our synagogue. Well, first of all, for everybody to know, Ellen and I are in the same synagogue, and 3 years ago, our synagogue started a Meet the Author program that I co-chair. And we have these we joined the Jewish Book Council, and we get authors to come and speak about their books, and we have a brunch, and it's a really nice program. But this past year, we additionally started a book club, and we did two events before we were pushed out of the building. And our last event was a mystery called Invisible City by Julia Dahl. She's not Jewish, but the book is about a character named Rebecca Roberts, who was born to a Hasidic mother and a Christian father, and the mother abandoned the child. And then years later, the book takes place years later in Brooklyn, and there's a murder of a Hasidic woman. It's a really well-written book. It was a finalist for the Edgar and Mary Higgins Clark Awards. And she's written a couple other books. One's called Conviction, and the other one is called Run You Down. Conviction has the same character, this character, Rebecca Roberts, Rebekah. And the book club, when we talked about it, I think it was January we had the meeting, and everybody had really enjoyed the book. I read a lot of mysteries, non-Jewish mysteries. Harlan Coben is one of my favorites. I don't know if anybody's ever read him.
I've read
Coben.
Yes, I've
Yeah,
read
he's
him.
in New Jersey. He's actually a New Jersey person too, so it's familiar. A lot of his places he writes about. I live in New Jersey, so it's familiar to me.
Okay, so you know what?
This was
We're
good.
gonna
Thank
go. You could bear with us. We're gonna go a few minutes more, not more than like 6 minutes. Let me emphasize.
Can I? This is my first one that I've had time to attend. I'm on 5 boards and I'm constantly busy. Can I get the list of the books?
Yes.
Yes, and they're on our website.
Send me an email at leber@wlcj.org. And if you haven't already,
Leiber.
I can send it to you, Susan.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you.
And Geeta Fried has her hand up.
I just have a comment about Ayelet Waldman. She's married to Michael Chabon. And 2 years ago, he gave a very, very controversial comment attacking Jewish in marriage. He's against supporting Israel and all their stuff. So although I enjoyed her mommy books, to be truthful, it sort of poisoned me to read anything she may ever write again because of their attitude towards in marriage. They're against it. They don't care if their kids marry Jewish. And he made this very big speech that was attacked by a lot of people. I'm sure you were aware of it. But because of their political beliefs, their Jewish beliefs, I just cut it off.
Okay,
That's
thank
all
you.
I know. Thank you.
Didn't know that. Okay, I have just 3 books to tell you about, and then we're going to wrap. But before, if you can stay with us, but I don't want to lose you. So I want you to know that our next session is on June 16th. And we will be Rachel Kamen will lead us in a discussion of book club favorites. So we'll find out what everyone else loves. And there'll be a Jewish emphasis on it, but other authors as well. And in between, we have that Women's League Reads author interview the evening of June 2nd. You'll see that in all the Women's League weekly announcements. So with that, let me tell you about a couple of interesting stories. There was a guy named Mo Berg. He, born in 1902, died in 1972. He was a catcher in the American League. He played for a few teams. He was pretty well known in those years, but he was also a spy during World War II. The CIA recruited him. So there is a book about him called The Catcher Was a Spy, The Mysterious Life of Mo Berg by Nicholas Davidoff, spelled Dawidoff, 1994. There's also a film, The Spy Behind Home Plate. Aviva Kempner is the director, so you can hear the Jewish names here. And the part of Mo Berg is played by the actor Paul Rudd. So he grew up in Harlem, to a Jew. He was born in Harlem to a Jewish pharmacist father. His family moved to Newark, New Jersey when he was a boy. He was very intelligent and always had an interest in baseball. So people though described him as having a very odd personality. And hearing about it today, you would think maybe he was on the autism spectrum or Asperger's in the way he dealt with people, but he was quite brilliant. He attended Princeton studying languages. He is said to have mastered 12 languages. He also attended Columbia Law School, and he was a whiz on a radio quiz show. So the CIA had sent him to Yugoslavia and during World War II, where he interviewed physicists around Europe to try to determine what the Nazis were up to with their nuclear program. And he even had a mission to possibly kill a German nuclear scientist, but that didn't happen. He received the Medal of Freedom by President Truman, but he refused it. So he was odd. But in the end, he died poor, as a poor man. He had lived with relatives the last years of his life. Just an interesting story. There's also a book I just read recently, The Alice Network by Kate Quinn.
Oh, that's very
I thought
good.
it's a very exciting story. There are two parallel stories. One is set in occupied France during World War I. It's based on the true story of a very effective women's spy network in southern France that worked along with the Allies, especially the British. One woman survivor of that network, then in 1947, after World War II, 30 years later, she is involved in the story when a young American woman who's pregnant goes to France in search of her cousin who had gone missing during World War II. This is the two stories merge, and characters are fascinating, all about women and what there is possible for them. And it's very well told and exciting. I want to also make mention of Waking Lions by Ayelet Gunder Goshen in Israeli. It was published first in Hebrew, then translated to English. She was also interviewed by Women's League Reads, and you can find that interview on the Women's League Reads page of Women's League's website. She herself is a clinical psychologist in Israel, so she wrote a thriller and murder mystery from a very psychological standpoint. And her new book is called The Liar. So it's highly recommended. It was one of our most popular featured books. So I could go on. There are lots of other mystery writers who were fabulous.
The Liar was very good, by the way.
What?
The Liar was a very good book.
Who's the author? Who's the
That's
author?
Ayelet Gunder Goshen. She's Israeli, but I heard her speak.
Can you spell it?
Very few in English.
Ayelet,
is her first name. Gundar, Gundar is the middle. Last name Goshen. You can search for her by the title too. Waking Lions is her first book, and The Liar is the newer book.
Oh, The Waking Lions I read, yeah.
It wasn't her first book, I'm sorry. She had a prior book called
Waking Liar I read.
Something. I can't remember.
And Alice Network was excellent. What a very good book.
I'm seeing in the chat box from Ellen Tillman that Ayelet Gunder Goshen is being interviewed tomorrow at 11:30.
Right. Yeah, I just got an email on it, and it's sent out by Lion House Agency. That must be her literary agency, because I don't think it's her publisher, I guess, to drum up interest in her new book.
Okay, most authors have their own website, and you could go to her website and find that, and I'm sure it's announced there.
Right.
Okay, great. So with that, we're going to call it a wrap.
Can I give you a plug for my daughter's book? She won awards for. It's called The 5 Books of Moses Lipinski by Karen X. Tulchinsky.
Thank you. I'm so pleased that we had this session and that so many our presenters. I want to thank you again, Ellen Tillman, Merrill Karras, and Rabbi Wolintz Fields. And with that, wish you a good Shavuos, and we'll meet again right here in Zoomland, Zoomberg, I think we're calling it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all presenters. It was
very
wonderful.
good. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian.
Great. Just great.
Thank you to all, and Vivian, thank you for organizing.
Certainly.
And Chag Sameach to everybody. By the way,
Chag
if you
Sameach.
want to, on Thursday at 1 o'clock, when we have our Psalm and our Kaddish, we'll also be including Yisker as well, if anyone wants to join us.